Welcome to another video from DIY Daily. Just put together a full step-by-step guide, just running you through how to replace the front wheel bearing on this 2011 Audi A4, and it's the B8 model. Obviously we're using a 2-poster ramp today. Does make the job a little bit easier, but to be honest, it's not too bad to do on these without a ramp. All I'd do is just jack it up really high on the side that you're doing, put an extra stand under it, just to give you a decent bit of height just to work around that saucer. Now the only thing I'd do to start with on this has got some different wheels on it, but on some of the other models where you've got the standard models, just before taking it up in the air, I would just take the centre cap off and just crack off the actual centre nut for the drive shaft there just before getting it up if you're using a bar, if you haven't got a buzz gun, but I'm using the impact driver on this one, so we'll get that off once we've got it up in the air and got the wheel off. Just before we get started, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, just click on the red subscribe button below to make sure you don't miss out on any future content. We've got quite a few other videos on the Audis that you might want to check out as well. And we'll just show you the parts that we're using. If you check the links in the description below, I'll put links to all the parts and all the tools used. Now this bearing is, we've got just the bearing. You can buy these as like a bearing complete with the centre hub flange, which if you're doing this sort of on your drive at home, you haven't got access to a press or any sort of pulling tools or anything like that, it might be worth buying it complete. But I'll put links to both in the description below. It's just a little bit easier if you haven't got a press or any pullers to do that. So, but basically the bearing comes, just got a little protective cap on there. It's just on this side, you've got a little magnetic pickup, which the ABS sensor picks up on that, so you need to be quite careful with that magnetic ring. But does also come with new bolts for the actual main hub flange there, and a new centre bolt as well. So just to start with, we'll just get it up in the air, get the driver's wheel, get the passenger's wheel off, and then just run you through everything a step at a time. Right, so now that we've got the wheel off, now the only thing I would have done differently if I was doing this without an impact driver, obviously with a decent impact driver, I'm not too worried about getting this bolt out there, but if I didn't have an impact driver, while it was still on the ground and took the centre cap off, I would have just used the long bar and just cracked this off while the wheel's biting on the ground there, so just to slacken it off ready before taking it up in the air. But to do the centre nut, you just want your 19mm Allen socket there. But next step now, I'm just going to undo that. Now we've got the caliper and the carrier here, just to make it nice and easy. There's no point in taking it off all individually, take it off just as one whole piece. And if you just come around the back, basically got one 21mm at the top there, and another one, stretch out, another one there as well. Basically just undo these two 21mm sockets, you can pull the whole carrier off as one piece. And I normally find it's easy enough just to tuck it, just so that you're not stressing the brake flexios. You can sort of tuck it and just sit it on the arm here at the back, or you can, if you want, just strap it up out the top here either way. So we'll just get the carrier off now and get that centre bolt out. And the only thing we'll have to do after that is just undo this little torque screw for the brake disc. Too much for the snap-on one, so just you've got the Milwaukee one out. Really decent bit of kit, these Milwaukee ones, got loads of power to them. I'm just not going to take that fully out, just going to leave that there, and then you can just give it a gentle tap. That's to push it through with your hands, just to push the CV through the back a little bit. You don't need to fully push it out at this stage. It's just, if you just push it back a little bit, it just gives you a bit better access on the back to the hub. So I'll just push that just a bit through for now. I've undone the two caliper carrier bolts there. The only other thing you might want to do, just so you don't stretch it, is just take this little clip out for the brake pad warning light. That's all. All you do is just use a little flat bladed screwdriver, just pop that back, and then you can just twist it round to get it out. That's all. So I'll just do that now. find your carrier's a little bit tight, short flat bladed screwdriver, just put it in against the bottom, against the disc, and you can just lever it off. So just for the video tonight, rather than just risking, sometimes, well, it's not too bad on the arm, but I might want to get in with the impact drive later on. Just sometimes you can catch it and knock it off, so I decided just to strap it up with a cable tied just up to the top arm up there. It just keeps it completely out of the way then. So the next thing I'm going to do is just undo the disc screw, and you just want a Torx 30 socket to get that off. Brake discs sometimes just get a little bit tight. The best way to just release it and crack it off, just hitting on the flat of it. You don't really want to be hitting it anywhere near the disc and risking catching the disc, but it just tends to just loosen it and just rattle it off there where it's just bit onto the hub of it. Right, next stage now that the disc's off, I'm just going to take the back plate off. You don't have to take the back plate off, it's just sometimes the hub can be a little bit tight, the carrier in the hub. Sometimes it depends how it comes off, we'll have a go at that in a bit obviously. But for the sake of these 3 T30 Torx screws, I always like to take them off, just get it out of the way, just so you don't catch it and bend it, that's all. Right, so now that's out of the way, you can start to see a bit more of the hub, and the screws just come through from the back side and just through there. So at this stage now, I'm just going to give these a quick scrub with a wide brush, just give them a soak with some penetrating oil, just to give us a bit better chance of getting the bolts out, that's all. They shouldn't normally come out too bad. Just in this side here, we've got the ABS sensor there. Again, you don't need to take the sensor out, chances are it won't come out anyway. These sensors are quite cheap, the connector just literally clips on there, so it is just the sensor. But as long as you're careful, you can get the hub and bearing out quite easily without damaging the sensor, so I tend to leave that in if I can. Right, so at this stage now, next thing we're going to do, the bolts are on the back there, and you're going to want a size 12 triple square socket. Again, I'll put a link in the description below to these and where you can get them from. But you can access them on the back there. You can access them without getting the drive shaft out. Some people show you taking the whole drive shaft out, but it's quite easy to get on them without the shaft out of the way really. It's just to get it out, you've got to take it off fully at the other end, at the gearbox there. So it's not too bad to take it off, but again, you can do it quite easily without. It's just to take it off, you've got to undo all the bottom ball joints and everything as well and get all the hub out of the way then. So but basically we can just get in there. I'm just going to use a bar just to crack them off and just get the ratchet on them and just get them off one by one. So we'll just get all them out now, then we'll move you on to the step after that. Right, so that's all 4 bolts fully loose now. They're just sat in the holes at the minute. I'll just pull them out in a sec. Just to get a bit of access on them, I was just because it's up in the air, I was just using the other wheel to turn it in each lock. Obviously, if it's on the ground, you can use the steering wheel just to put it in the position wherever gives you best access. But to get most of the bolts, 3 of them, I could just use the normal socket on the ratchet. I did use the bar to start with just to crack them off, but the lower right hand one is just a little bit tight access with one of the arms off the bottom of the shocker in the way, so I just used like a bit of an extension just to get through when it was in the left hand lock to crack that off. And then the top left one there, it was a little bit tight as I was trying to get it out. They've got a thread lock on them. I didn't want to risk damaging the bolt head and not being able to get it out, So just for that last bit, I just put the impact driver on it just to take it out rather than risking damaging the centre of the bolt there. But we'll just drop it down now, just to a bit of a height so we can access the front of the hub flange. Right, so I just took 3 of the bolts out from the back there. One of them is just a little bit just tight in there against that the bolt there, but it doesn't matter, I can soon get that out once I've got this front piece off there. But the next stage now these can sometimes get quite tight just where it goes actually through the hub. So first thing I'm going to do, there's a couple of different methods you can try to do this. I'll just have a go at it. I don't know how this one's going to come off tonight. Sometimes they come off quite easy, sometimes they're a bit trickier. But to start with, this is why I wanted the shield removing. Just going to give this a few taps with a hammer, just see if we can crack it off. We don't really want to be hitting this too hard on the back of the hub. But see if we can just crack it off. You'll start to see if it starts breaking away. You can sort of tap it evenly all the way around just to break it away. And if it doesn't come off that way, sometimes you can sort of try get with the bolt in the back, put the socket on the bolt, and then you can hit the bolt from the back. Obviously just put it in a few threads into the hub there just to knock it through. Or you can try sort of knocking it with a chisel. I've had to use an air chisel sometimes to try and break it from this sort of position here. Obviously this is part of the bearing, so you don't need to worry about it too much if you're replacing it, but you can sort of air chisel it against there, trying to break it off that way. And once you've sort of cracked it off a little bit, just get some penetrating oil in the gap and you should be able to get it off. But we'll have a go at it. I'm hoping it's not going to come off too bad tonight for the video. So right, so that actually come out really easy. I don't think I've ever had one actually come out as easy as that in the past before. So, but normally a few firm whacks and it does start to crack it off. They're not too bad, but I have had them a lot worse. But what normally happens is on the little face here between there and the hub, it builds up like a load of corrosion build up in there, and that just sort of seizes the bearing into the hub. That's also. But yeah, normally a few firm whacks. Sometimes you have to get the stage of chiseling it to crack it off, but not normally. But so it's come out not too bad there. But now that it's out, obviously just be careful with your shaft in the back as you're pulling it away from it. I'll just show you. So you can just see on the inside we've got the ABS sensor here, comes through the hub. So you just need to be really careful. It's quite delicate, you don't want to damage that, otherwise you'll have to replace it. Next thing you want to do at this stage is just clean the surface up. You don't have to go too mad with it, but you do want to just clean sort of the corrosion build up on there with a bit of emery cloth. And on the inside face here, this is where what tends to cause the issue with them seizing in. So always give this a really good clean up on the inside. And when we're putting it back together, we'll just put a smear of grease around the inside of there as well. And we've just got the bearing here. Obviously it does come off with the hub centre flange all in the middle of it, so we're going to need to press that off in a minute and separate that from it, get the new bearing and swap that and press it onto it, ready to refit it. That's also at this stage now, if you haven't got this complete and you've got just the bearing like we're fitting tonight, obviously you're going to need, if you haven't got a press, you're going to need to take it to someone with a press just to swap that over. But so you can buy these complete and it basically comes in this condition here. I'll put a link to one like this, so you can, at this stage now you can just simply refit the whole unit as well, which is a bit easier if you haven't got the press or like that to do it. So but we'll just clean the centre flange up now and then we'll get on to swapping the bearing over. Right, so I've just rigged up a bit of a setup over by the press. Basically what we're going to need to do now is just press this centre piece out of the flange there. So we're going to need a piece that just sits just on the inner ear, obviously just touching the inside section, not the actual bearing there, to press that through the middle. So what we're going to do, I've just rigged up this, we've got this sort of circle piece to sit it in. You can just put a bit of metal either side and it just cups underneath these brackets there. So I'll just rig that up in place. I'm just going to sit the centre on there and we'll just press the centre through. So just set the camera up just while we do that. What I found is just sometimes you have to jiggle it about a bit just to find a sort of setup that works. Sometimes these lugs are a bit bigger, which does make it a little bit easier. But the centre flange shouldn't be too tight to get out, so they should work perfectly okay. We've just got a little circle, solid metal ring there, which is small enough to fit in the centre there without actually touching the bearing, just on the hub flange. So. So let's press the centre hub flange through. This always happens as you press them out. Basically the inner race will just sort of separate away from it. But that's the main bit of the bearing off. But you're always left, it always leaves the inner race attached to the actual centre hub flange. So next step now, we're going to need to get this off. Now there's a few different methods that you can use to get this off. I'll sort of try and use the method that is best really if you haven't got a lot of tools or pullers or anything like that to do it, but there is a way that you can do it with the oxyacetylene. I've done a little video on it in the past where you can have it spinning, heat it up where it's upside down, and the ring will, once it gets hot and expands, will drop off. Or you can get some pullers, but they're a bit tricky because you can't really get in on the back of them. I've seen a few people showing videos with the pullers, but you can never really get in the back very well to get at them, so we're going to use a grinder just to nick it. So we'll just get it set up on the bench now and we'll just run you through how to do that. Alright, so we've just got it rigged up in the vise, a couple of tools out ready. We've got a grinder, chisel and an hammer. It might be a bit easier to show you once we've got it off. What we're going to be looking to do, you have to just slice it at a bit of an angle. You have to be really careful. You're only looking to break the race. You don't want to score. You can get away with a little nick, but you really want to be trying your hardest not to touch the actual centre flange at all. So, but if you just run it at a bit of an angle with the angle grinder, basically all we're looking to do is get as deep as we can so that it's thin enough, and then we're just going to crack it with a chisel, and as soon as it's released as soon as it's cracked, it's released the pressure and we're able to just pull it straight off. So all I'll do is I'll do that, and then I'll show you after. It'll be a bit clearer what we've done there. So you're better off when you're doing it just taking your time, just do a bit at a time. If you think you're a bit too deep or anything, just try it with a chisel. Basically once you get it deep enough, the chisel will crack it quite easily. So so that's the inner race off. You can just see, just sort of grinded through it at a bit of an angle, and then it's just got to the point where it's thin enough, and it's just cracked it with a chisel. That way, the grinder doesn't actually go through the metal and damage the race at all. I'll just show you the race there. You just see nice and clean, no score marks on there. You'll quite often find these centre flanges when you take them out, when other people have fitted wheel bearings and they've been a bit rough, you'll see sort of big nick marks in them. So a little nick mark's not too bad, you get away with that, but you certainly don't want to be going too deep with it. So, but now that that's out, next thing now we're ready to do is get the new bearing pressed onto the flange there. So I'll just get it rigged back up over at the press. Right, so now ready to put the new bearing onto the hub flange. So for this stage, we're going to press the actual bearing down onto the hub flange. So because it's got a flat bottom, we can pretty much just sit that on a nice flat surface in the press there. And basically we're going to press the bearing onto it. So we can just slot it over to start with. Now this, on the hub flange, you can see the inner piece is actually it's got a slight recess on it, so it always drops over the first bit real nice straight onto that, and then we're ready to press it on to the bottom bit. Now it wants to be fitted so that the magnetic ring is facing upwards. Obviously the ABS sensor needs to read against that ring, but be careful not to. Obviously with that ring there, you'll sort of notice, just can't really put it on the wrong way around. But so we're going to need to do at this stage now, just while it's set up here. Basically I'm just going to have a quick look around for a tool that will just sit on this centre ring of the bearing here. You need to be really careful. You don't want anything big on it that's likely to damage the magnetic ring there. It's quite delicate, that, so we're just going to find something that just sits on this inner ring there, so we can just simply press that directly down over the hub flange there. As we press it down, the press should press it relatively easily really. We'll see it move up a little bit, and then we'll usually run it down. You just sort of feel it as you're pumping it, just to where it sort of stiffens up, where it's actually bottomed out in its home position, that's all. So we'll just get that all rigged up now and just press it into place. So we're all rigged up now. Just found this bottom. Usually keep a load of old wheel bearings for using on the press, because you get a few different sizes. But basically you can just see that's just sat on the inside there. It's not touching the magnetic ring, so it's not going to damage that. I'm just had to sort of just tower it up a little bit, just so we can just wind the press onto it to press it in. And when you're doing it, it's not too bad on this bearing because it's nearly dropped on all the way anyway. But any wheel bearing, you always want to just have a quick look and just make sure it's sort of situated nice and square. Just keep an eye on it as you're pressing it down. Just make sure it's pressing nice and even, that's all. We'll just press that into place now. That's all pressed in nicely, went in nice and smoothly. Once we've done, just give it a bit of a wipe off, just give it a quick feel, just make sure it feels okay. That's absolutely spot on there. So obviously at this stage now, we'll just take it back over to the vehicle, just start rebuilding everything and just chuck it apart. So what we'll do is get back over there and run you through all the torque settings as well as we're putting it back together. Right, so at this stage now, we're just ready to refit the bearing and refit everything just the same as we took it apart. Obviously, just earlier on, did just give this a little bit of a clean up, just smear a bit of grease on the inside there as well. So it's quite important to clean up that inner face, really. It'll just help you for any issues in the future if you've got to take it off again or anything like that. All we'll do is we'll put that into place, obviously fit the new bolts in the back. Now I'll just put an overlay of the torque settings for some of the brake components and some of the suspension components as well, but I'll overlay the torque setting for each bit as I do it as well. But basically the wheel bearing itself, the actual main 4 bolts for that is 80 Newton meters and 90 degrees. So just get that all set into place. I'll just push the drive shaft through and just roughly put the bolt in there just to make sure it's square and home, that's all as we do that. But yeah, we'll just speed through some of this section and just run you through the torque settings and anything that you need to be checking along the way. Now all 4 hub bolts are torqued up properly. Next thing we're going to do the centre hub flange bolt. Now the proper torque setting for this is 200 Newton meters plus 180 degrees. Now I am just going to do this with an impact driver. Obviously I'm quite confident using one, do use one all the time. But if you're a little bit unsure, you really want to be torquing it up properly. So now that the hub bolt's on, next thing we're going to do, just put a bit of copper grease on the steel parts there, just put a bit of copper grease on the threads. You don't really want to be lathering this whole ring in copper grease. Just put a little bit of copper grease just on the threads for the wheel bolts there, and just for the disc screw as well. But the little threads in the alloy hub, just put normal grease in there. You don't really want to be putting copper grease in the alloy threads there. So that's, now that we're at this stage, next thing we'll do is just put the actual heat shield back on. The torque settings for the heat shield. for the heat shield are 18 Newton meters. The disc screw, we'll be putting that on in a minute, that's 5 Newton meters. The hub carrier bolts, the 221s on the back there, they're 190 Newton meters. So we'll just get it all back together and run you through anything after that. You might have to find it's not too uncommon for these heat shields to be all rotted out around the bolt holes. This one's actually been repaired in the past. Someone's put a bit of a washer on it on the front and the back there. So, but you might find that it's all rotted off around the actual bolt hole. Right, so everything's back together now. The last thing we had to do was just simply clip that wiring harness just back into place there for the brake pad sensor. But everything else is back together. Hub carrier's all torqued up. Next thing I'm going to do is just put the wheel on. I'm just going to lightly nip the wheel. I'll torque it once I've dropped it down to the ground. The torque setting for the wheel bolts is 120 Newton meters. We'll just get the wheel on and just show you just to check the bearing quick as well after. So now that's back together, the wheel's just lightly nipped, just enough to pull it back properly before we torque it up. Next thing we're going to do, just check the wheel bearings, just spin it up, just spin it fairly fast just to have a quick listen to it. Then we'll just grab each side of the wheel and just work it, just check for any free play, separate movement rather than obviously just moving the wheels. Check it side to side and just back and forth from the bottom and just check and make sure you can't feel no free play in the bearing there. So just do that quick, then we'll drop it down, torque it up, and that's the job finished. Obviously once you've finished it, just give it a quick spin down the road just to make sure it feels okay, and then really it's advisable to re-torque your wheels after about 50 miles as well. But the torque setting for the wheel nuts is 120 Newton meters. But yeah, hope you liked the video. If you did, give it a quick thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out some of the other videos on there as well. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.